You're watching The World with me, Charles Anyegolu. Let's return to our top story. The winds of a global trade war are blowing hard. More stock market turmoil after Donald Trump's latest global tariffs came into effect. With China the worst hit, Beijing responds with fury, warning that China will definitely retaliate, and it has. So how are the tariffs being viewed here in Nigeria? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the former chairman of the board of directors of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Kyari Bukar, who was also the MD and CEO of the Central Securities Depository of the Nigerian capital markets, and is currently heading a clutch of other businesses, including the Africa operations of Inlax, the banking and e-payment firm. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles.
How worried are you about the impact of these tariffs on the many businesses you head or are affiliated with?
Many of the businesses I'm affiliated with are services companies, and therefore they are not quite
lucky you.
Affected. The interesting thing, though, is that there are anybody who is manufacturing and exporting, especially to OECD countries or to the US, would be affected one way or the other. The other thing that is general in nature is the effect it has on the global economy. One act by one person has now reverberating all over the globe. And I think there will be a general slowdown of GDP growth as predicted by the World Bank or IMF. It would also affect the US, probably much more than the rest of the world.
Because they're a big consumer society.
They're a huge consumption. The second is the inflationary effect of that act. Because if you look at the trajectory of the concept of free trade that had been embraced as the new world order, it's a sudden spike and a shift. And this had not happened, particularly considering the US, in probably about 100 years. So if we go back to the early 1900s, then it means that, and at that time the US economy wasn't as sophisticated as it is, and therefore the consumption level is much higher today than before, and the appetite for import, globally speaking, and particularly in the US, is much higher. Therefore, the inflationary effect of the tariff, which is a hidden tax, would also hit the consumers, households, as well as business operations generally.
So no escape, basically.
No escape. We are all going to be affected one way or the other.
Now, some countries are talking about negotiating. We mentioned that earlier. Others are talking about fighting. China seems to have made its decision. Which way is Nigeria likely to go? It's got 14%, which is considerably smaller than a lot of the other countries.
Yes. I mean, when you look at the Nigerian rate, which is 14%, everybody is getting 10% as the base. So Nigeria is literally 4%. And I believe the reason might not be far from the fact that 60 or 70% of Nigerian exports to the US is a commodity that's not going to be touched, which is oil and gas. Whereas in terms of manufactured goods, we have very little. The rest are all mostly commodity or commodity-related products and services. Therefore, we haven't heard much from the federal government. I know I have heard something from the Minister of Finance that says it's very inconsequential, it's immaterial. And the statement was compared to Vietnam, which to me is not how it should be stated. It's how is it affecting us and our economy.
Because we are a big consumer society as well.
And we import quite a lot from the US, even though we do have a trade surplus when you look at our total exports versus our total imports from the US. Now, if you look at, for example, China, 15% of China's annual exports goes to the US. Now that's huge.
That's very big.
Compared to 7.5% from the US to China of the total exports of US. Now when the two sides are doing what Gandhi used to say, you know, an eye for an eye leads to everybody being blind.
Indeed.
I think that's what we are seeing. We're just being spectators to a fight that doesn't have an end, literally, because if you do not stop and start talking, it means that it's going to be affecting all of us. Now, the second thing about China is that China has indicated that they are going to ride through this. And essentially, the punchback that we've just heard in the last few hours is an indication that they're not going to budge. The other countries that have responded in kind were selective. EU, for example, quite
they were very selective.
Canada, selective. Mexico, selective.
They're leaving... They're open to negotiation.
That's what it is, literally. So everybody else is talking about negotiation, or in the case of India and the rest of us, we're not even saying we're going to respond. We're going to bring down tariffs to zero or whatever, and we'll wait and see what Israel does. But the effect on us is what we should look at, put our heads together, especially the emerging markets, the South, and by extension, the continent of Africa.
It's interesting that countries like Vietnam, that you mentioned earlier, have offered to bring their tariffs down to zero. Correct. But Trump officials are saying that even if you do this, that's not good enough. I mean, what President Trump wants to do is to eliminate the trade surplus these countries have. But I mean, that's totally impossible for poor countries, isn't it? There isn't a world that exists in which poor countries in Africa or Asia or Latin America could buy as much from the US as they export.
Indeed, because the purchasing power is low. And in the case of Vietnam and the rest, similar Southeast Asian countries, it is the fact that they need to be manufacturing the low labor cost that, or income that they have is where the advantage lie for them to do the manufacturing and sending it out to the likes of the US. And if truly Trump is looking at reciprocity, what is the reciprocal of zero? It's zero. So
that's a very good point.
The computation is arbitrary. It's not reciprocity in the true sense of the word. And even the formula that they used, you know, if you look at it, it doesn't make sense because certain items in the list need to be discounted before you do that X minus, you know, the Greek letters in that formula. So essentially what this is that it is a totally old, archaic concept of trading, and as a result, it becomes a catalyst for global shift in trade.
Now, talking about global shift, is this perhaps an opportunity for African countries to strengthen their ties with each other as a way of building this long talked about, long awaited shared future?
Exactly. In fact, the point is that when something bad or terrible happens, can you see
an opportunity?
See an opportunity. So it is basically the adage of the Chinese, you know, the challenge can be turned into into an opportunity. And for us in the emerging markets, and particularly for Nigeria and the African countries, there has to be a realignment of trade and trade relations. And what that means is that with the enactment and establishment of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, plus now there would be more bilateral relations with some of the more developed economies that are looking at investing in Africa, there may be an opportunity for us to attract investments for people or countries that want to avoid those high tariffs from the US. So it may take time, but we need to position ourselves and strategically take the posture of saying we are inviting potential investors to come in. We have the ready market, we have youth, we have the talent and education to do what you have been doing in your backyards. Bring it on here, and we can then be the platform to be the new export-driven engine for manufacturing.
Well, I hope that your words are being heeded by the people that make these things happen. I want to thank you very much indeed. Kyari Bukar was the former chairman of the board of director of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. He was also the MD and CEO of the Central Securities Depository of the Nigerian Capital Markets. He heads a clutch of businesses, including the Africa operations of Inlax, the banking and e-payment firm. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Jim.